And we're live. And just telling followers that we've started a live video, but I am Jo Fairley and I'm very much looking forward in a moment to being joined by the wonderful Geza Shcoen. He's got to ask to join the conversation, but I'm sure he'll be here in a minute. Now I've had, yeah, here he comes. Right. Escentric molecules. And he should be here any moment now. Hooray, it
worked! Hello! Hey!
The triumph. How are you, Geza?
Yeah, all is good here. We got blue sky, you know. Bit of a virus going on, but that's probably everywhere, so...
Yeah. I'm curious, actually, how locked down are you in Berlin?
I mean, it's not a law that you can't go outside. Obviously, you know, you have to do your errands and food and this and that, but you're meant to stay inside as much as you can, I think. Yeah. You know, so all the kindergartens, they're still closed. The schools are closed.
Yeah.
Only the infrastructure jobs are carrying on.
Are still working. Yeah. Now, of course, for you, working from home is normal. Unlike probably pretty much every other perfumer I've ever interviewed, I think. So your lab has been in your house for quite some time, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, for 20 years, yeah.
So what is different about now? I mean, is it the fact that you've got your daughter there all the time?
Yeah, I mean, she's here. She's playing with Play-Doh right now, making a bit of noise, so don't be surprised. Yeah, I mean, you know, we look after her. It's difficult, but everyone has got the same thing to cope with right now. So, you know, we just do it. We'll take it as it is.
And you told me anyway that sometimes you literally get up and work in the middle of the night if you feel like it, if the inspiration strikes.
I mean, that's extreme, but I have done that on the rare occasion where, yeah, I mean, you know, the lab's just 20 meters from here, so I can just walk in whenever I like. But that maybe happens once a year that I do that.
Okay. And are you finding that you can be creative in what is quite a stressful time?
You know, I mean, I think it has an influence on all of our souls, and it's rather, I still find it rather depressing than uplifting. I mean, anyone who takes this as something he or she can come out more vividly or with more energy, I don't understand. I find it depressing, and you know, it just changes so much. You can't travel, you can't do this, can't do that. No, it stresses me out. I'm not the best right now in terms of creations, that's for sure.
We're just getting through the day, basically.
Exactly.
And of course, you were just about to unveil O5 molecule, the long-awaited. I've heard it described like waiting for the new Hilary Mantel novel. So how has the current situation changed the plans for that? I mean, we're delighted to have it in our new Discovery Box, which we're launching on Friday. We're actually the very first time selling fragrance on our website, which is your O5 molecule. But has it altered the plans for a global launch?
Well, I mean, we have launched it. It's just very unfortunate that we hit probably the worst time ever to launch a fragrance. I mean, we had it all pinned down to a date, I think mid-March at Harvey Nichols. I had invited lots of people. We wanted to do a little party. They were all prepared. We had windows beautifully, you know, with lots of very typical stuff for us. It just all went nowhere. I think nobody, I mean, the party was canceled 3 days before the event. I'm sure very little people were walking down the street so that could actually see the windows, which looked so great. But yeah, I mean, this is probably, you know, that was the worst timing ever. So the fragrances are out, but, you know, what can you do? I mean, everything's shut down.
I can promise you we are going to have a big party with you when this is all over. So um, that's my promise. We have got lots of questions from our community.
Sure.
And I will come, we'll talk a little bit about O5 a bit later on, but kind of going right back to the very beginning. What was your first perfume love? And this is from somebody called Beverly Crew. I think she's talking about literally before you even became a perfumer, what was the first perfume that pushed your button?
Well, I mean, I think it went along in that period of time when I started being interested in fragrances, and probably was around 12 or 13. And I had just discovered that you could send a postcard to the depot of a brand where they hold their fragrances and where they have their stock. And in those days, you know, you could send a postcard and they would send you samples at home.
Really?
So, yeah, and I think I remember that the first one I discovered actually in a magazine was from Balmain. And they had a fragrance back then called Ébène de Balmain.
Yeah, and then Ebony.
And it was a white sort of cardboard packaging with a black and a copper strip on, which looked already quite arcane. And I loved the fragrance. I thought it was amazing. Unfortunately, discontinued now for years and years. But yeah, I mean, I was able to, you know, that was one of my first fragrances I got sent, and I kind of fell in love with it. But it was a good fragrance in hindsight, I have to say that.
I wondered, could you recreate it now? Do you remember it? No.
Nah, that would be difficult. I mean, first of all, in those days, you know, that wasn't the beginning of the 80s. There was no restrictions. We were able to use absolutely everything that was in the market. So I'm sure it was full of beautiful naturals and mosses and animalic stuff, which is now forbidden. I would not even dare to do that just because it would be frustrating. And I simply wouldn't have all the ingredients which, you know, you need to come up with a proper match.
Yeah, exactly. When you were, so at what point did you decide that you wanted to be a perfumer?
That probably, I mean, it all grew on me when I visited Harman and Reimer, nowadays Simrise, when I visited them for the first time. I was 16, and I just drove up. You know, I lived in Kassel, which was like an hour down south. So I think a friend of mine took me who had a driving license, and I just I just walked in and I said, "Can I talk to someone?" And they were like, "Do you have an appointment?" And I was like, "No." And they were like completely confused. So the lady who runs the human resources department, she came down and talked to me and said, "Listen, you know, you just can't walk in here." Sort of, you know, that's not the way to do it. So, but I had a chat to her. She said what would be good to have to actually apply for the education. And I then got a date with a perfumer half a year later. So half a year I went back, and he had a proper fragrance or like an ingredients screening with me. So he showed me lots of things. He made a few tests with me, and that was good enough back then to stay in touch with him. I mean, I was 16, 17, you know, so I hadn't even finished school. So I had to go back, finish school, made my civil service, which was another 2 years. And then shortly afterwards, they did plan to start the next education. So I did like an elective placement for another 1.5 years. And then January 92, the education started with 4 guys doing the education to become a perfumer.
And you did you ever think of becoming anything else after that? Did you flirt with any other career? No.
Not really. I mean, because it's such an open, wild field that, you know, I mean, it's endless, really.
Yeah.
What makes it lesser endless, unfortunately, these days is obviously all the restrictions we come across about and we have to obey. And that deletes ingredients on and on every year, which is not great. But no, I mean, look, we've done Escentric Molecules, we've done the Beautiful Mind series. I've constantly been working on fragrances for other brands. I'm really busy. No, I'm not looking for more work or another job. No, I don't.
And a question from Natasha Awuku. What was your greatest challenge as an upcoming perfumer? I mean, was there a bit of it that you found difficult, or did it all come quite naturally? Are you quite scientifically minded?
No, I mean, look, I think the greatest challenge is always to have a good first idea to come up with something which is really different to what there is already. And we have already thousands of fragrances in the market, and every year there come more. So I think that's probably with any creative approach, with anything new you wish to do and to portray, you need a good concept.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, I would never sit there and go, oh, I want to make a fougere, and let's take some moss and some lavender and I take mandarin instead of lemon. That wouldn't do it for me. I don't know how other people work, but no, it's always the initial idea, and that can be a singular ingredient. There can be just one natural or one chemical, or just like a whiff of a note you perceive in nature or wherever. But I need a trigger to start somewhere.
Yeah. And of course, that is exactly how you began with Eccentric Molecules, with O1. Mm-hmm. Was this kind of groundbreaking, crazy idea of using a single molecule. What gave you that idea?
That started already back in the 80s when I noticed that loads of my friends, they weren't wearing fragrance. They just didn't. And they said, nah, it's too much for me, too sweet, too fruity, too, I'd rather wear nothing than having a strong fragrance hovering about me. And then when I joined perfumery in the early 90s, I came across ISU Super very quickly within the first few days when I had my, I had kind of an office next to the chief perfumer, which had all the ingredients they had filled into my own bottles, if you like. They gave me a scale so I could start weighing ingredients to get a bit of a ratio in there. And when I smelled ISU Super, I thought that just smells amazing. And I have smelled that before in lots of other fragrances. So I filled up a little bottle. I gave it to a friend of mine when we went out on the weekend to our bar in our hometown, and it just really took 10 minutes till this woman stood still right in front of us and said, "You smell so nice here." And if I think about it, that was 1990.
Yeah.
So in those days, you just wouldn't walk up to anyone who was wearing a fragrance and just say, "Excuse me, what fragrance you're wearing." But it made her stop, and I spoke to her, and she said the fragrances she liked was Fahrenheit and Tresor. And both Fahrenheit and Tresor, I mean, they're so different to another, it's just completely different fragrances. But the link they have, the crossover they share, is a big chunk of ISU Super. So I thought, hang on, so this woman stops right in front of us, having smelled only ISU Super. I ask her, she says, Fahrenheit and Tresor. So it just grew on me that this ingredient is quite magic, and that there's more about it than, well, this has a smell, and that's it. So I then showed it 94 to Diesel when I was working on the first Diesel fragrance. And the accountant at the time said, when I said, "Do you want to show them just a chemical?" And he said, "I think that's even a bit too far-fetched for Diesel." So, obviously the awareness for any changes to the current and traditional and to the historics of fragrances just wasn't there. It was too early. And I mean, the idea would have worked for Diesel as much as it worked for Escentric Molecules, probably even better, because they were like the super cool brand in the 90s. But that's where it all began, with that thing in the bar where this woman just stood still and said, "Somebody smells so great here." That was a positive shock in a way.
Absolutely. But it still takes a lot of courage. I mean, you were working for a big perfume house. It takes a lot of courage to decide, I want to do this myself. So what gave you that spur and the kind of courage to do that?
I think it was paired with the negatives we had back then at our firm. They had just done a huge merge with Fluorescent in the 90s, and they had done another merge. And when you do these mergers in a creative industry, it's always difficult. And all of a sudden, you know, you have two people who used to do the same job, and now you have two of them, so one will have to go. So that was badly managed in our firm. We didn't get the best briefings. I was really frustrated, and more than that, I think I just wanted out. I didn't feel well. I thought, I want to try this on my own, see what happens. So I left. I went back to London, where also my girlfriend was living at the time. That also speeded up the process a bit. And I just, you know, I think for the first few months I did nothing. I was so frustrated with that life back in the industry that I really took a long break. And then I slowly connected myself back to the industry. And first I was working with Expression Parfumée, which is a small house in Grasse. They gave me raw material. And I'll never forget, on my first visit at Expression Parfumée, it must have been March, April 2002. I went back with my trolley on the plane with 16 kilograms of liquids in my trolley.
God.
In, you know, like 50, 60 aluminium cans, the biggest of like 1 kilogram down to like 5 grams in a glass bottle. These days were possible. Back then, nobody did care.
Yeah, now you can take 100 mils. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And then later I joined IFF. I became a consultant for them and have been since.
And so when you did launch it, it really became a cult success very, very quickly. Were you surprised by how well received it was?
Oh, totally. I mean, look, my experience basically was still that one thing in the 90s in this bar. I had never really done any sort of tests or, you know, big focus groups to find out how the people would react to that. I knew it would work. I knew it would work for some. I didn't expect so many people to like it, but it just shows that I think fragrances in general, they're always very complex.
Yeah.
And everything is complex, you know, life, the job, your private life, spare time becomes stressful for some people. Everything is sort of difficult and overloaded and full. And I think anything you provide to the public, whatever it is, which has simplicity, I think will be appreciated. And a simple smell, if it's good, will be appreciated as well. Nobody's longing for always, you know, complex, same structured fragrance compositions, which, you know, was thought to be the best till then. And all of a sudden, from the late 90s or the mid 90s already, with Comme des Garçons probably, we've seen niche fragrances and niche houses appearing. And that has changed perfumery quite a bit. And then at some point, the big houses saw that all the niche companies were very successful the way they were doing it. So they copied them. And then they made the same things the niche houses made. So it's a mix max these days.
Do you think, I mean, obviously when we come out of this whole pandemic, how do you think the landscape will have changed for fragrance generally? And do you feel that with this idea of simplicity, I mean, even though your fragrances are very complex, they have a kind of purity of idea to them. Do you feel that that is going to be something that we'll see more widely? Do you think there's going to be you know, we've all learned in the last few weeks to pare back and appreciate the basics?
I think Corona will certainly change a lot. I mean, we can't even yet foresee. I'm sure that will happen. I mean, also we'll have a huge economic crisis on top of it. But yeah, I mean, maybe we'll come back to stuff which was overruled before by the complexity of life, what I just mentioned, which now we have sort of identified again as something valuable. You know, people now being forced, being at home, having to do different things and having to do those things differently than before, having home, you know, work offices at home, and all of a sudden maybe, you know, they have to look after their kids as well, like we do. That changes a lot. And I think in terms of fragrance, I mean, we have seen already there are some brands like Nomenclature or Ether. They have done similar concepts to what we've done, so that all of a sudden the focus on the sheer aroma chemicals, companies aren't afraid anymore. They're boasting about them,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is certainly different. That was like untouched before, and so now, you know, people have got the conscience and the awareness that fragrances, of course, are not just made of naturals, and good that is, because then they wouldn't smell as great.
Yeah, they wouldn't. No. Um, we have a lovely question here, and a nice compliment from somebody, Vlad Popper, who says, I appreciate so much your work. I'm a huge fan of your olfactive style. But he would like you to explain how come the molecules in particular, the single note scents, are expressed so very differently on different people's skin.
I mean, yeah, they will never smell exactly the same on one person to the next, but that's got to do with, you know, our body chemistry. We all live differently. We all eat differently. We all drink differently. Some people smoke, some don't. You drink alcohol, you don't. You do sports, you don't. You eat a lot, you don't. Everything we put into our bodies will be oozed out afterwards, one way or the other. That has an impact on anything you put on skin, which is meant to be radiant, to go into the room again. So, you know, if you were molecular one and you had a big curry last night,
it's going to smell different.
It's going to smell different than if you've had just a bowl of salad and you had a good 8-9 hours sleep. You know, that's just everything. I mean, but that's for other fragrances as well. If you give Fahrenheit to two guys, it probably won't smell exactly the same on them. It's with everything. It becomes a bit more obvious maybe with something like the molecules, because you would expect this to be just really one-dimensional and just that, and
they're so not.
Exactly. And I think, you know, I mean, overall, I think the general smell of those molecules on different people is, let's say, 70-80% the same. And the rest is just individual tweaks of your body chemistry, which will make it come across a little different. But I think I would always see if somebody's wearing molecule, regardless of what they've done. This will still come through, I think.
Does it ever surprise you though? Do you ever smell one of them on somebody and go, "Oh, that's interesting"?
I have had many years when I was walking through Berlin and I came across somebody wearing it, and I thought, "Oh, fantastic! That smells great. What is that?" Oh, and then I realized myself, which is interesting to me, because I mean, it doesn't happen these days anymore because I got used to it and it just goes quicker in my brain. But at first, it was like, you know, you obviously detect it, you perceive it, you smell it, and it does already something with you before your brain gets going. And I thought, oh, great. And then, hang on, I know the smell, and I even know where it comes from. But no, it's maybe it is the simplicity thing. So we do perceive it, and we do think, oh, this smells great. And that's the first thing which happens. And then everything rational comes after that. But yeah, no, I mean, I love smelling the molecules on people. I think they're great. Really works.
Yeah. We have a request from one of the readers, like one of the viewers I could see. Would you ever consider using ambretolide as a molecule?
No.
No.
It's a simple no. Because, I mean, ambretolide is absolutely one of my favorite musks, no doubt. Smells wonderful. It's really warm. It's really creamy. It's got this natural note of amber seed. That's all great. But I would never do a musk, just because every fragrance basically ends in musk. And that becomes kind of arbitrary then, because if you smell purely of what every fragrance ends up in anyway, then I think people wouldn't care about that smell, which is why, no, we're not going to do a musk.
But so the new Opal, the material at the heart of the molecule and Escentric is cashmeran. Mm-hmm. So what drew you to cashmeran? I love it. It's my favorite of all five.
Oh yeah,
it's absolutely my favorite. I have a little bottle
cool.
here.
Okay, super.
I love it.
05, I mean, I watched various molecules over the years because, you know, people ask me, so what's the next molecule? And I think with the first 3 or 4, it was just absolutely clear they had to become molecules because they all four perform enormously well and just smell great. The fifth one, I mean, Kashmiran is an ingredient, you know, we've had it as long as we've had Icy Super or Amboxan or several others. But Kashmiran is very complex.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
even
really
though
complex.
and even though it has been used in so many fragrances before and it has become, you know, a part of proper modern perfumery, I watched it, and I watched it for several weeks, sometimes fresh, sometimes looked at blotters I had standing for days and weeks even, because it lasts quite long. And I just made notes, and came to my attention that Kashmiran is actually quite multifaceted. And having just said the thing about the musks, what does make Kashmiran unique is actually, I think the overall character, you could say, is woody, but it has a part of a musky creaminess.
Yeah.
Which again is wonderful because most ingredients are very linear, and you really need the help of other chemicals and more than anything other naturals to, you know, make the best out of it. But Kashmiran is not just woody and a little bit musky. It also has a piney note to me.
It's got a sort of brightness to it,
Yeah.
I find.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's light and bright, and funnily enough, IFF, they have asked, they've had several task force where they ask people what color they would add to an ingredient they're smelling.
Yeah.
And Kashmiran came clearly out to be blue. Would you believe it?
Really, really.
So all of this came together also with the addition that I have access to a house in Mallorca where I've been to over the past 2 years on and off. And when you get there, it's quite remote. It's in the northwest between Dea and Soller.
Yeah,
it's 300 meters high over sea level. And to get there, you need to park your car, and then you need to walk an old Roman cobblestone way. And on this way, so many times, I had so many different scent impressions, mostly because I was there obviously when it was warm, so it was summer. But you must imagine, I mean, this cobblestone way, this path is probably around 1,000 years old. It's really ancient. The whole flora and fauna around there, all the plants, the trees, the bushes, they've been growing there for hundreds of years. I have olive trees on my ground. Some of them are more than 1,000 years old. They are registered. So all these woods there, they have been drenched with sun for 250 days a year, and then they get 50 days of, you know, what's the word? I mean, it's been then it's raining really hard. Torrential rain, I was looking for that expression.
Yeah.
So out of these weather extremes, excuse me, I need to get a drink.
Yeah, sure.
Out of these weather extremes, that does something to the nature. So, you know, you can imagine all these woods, they're kind of oozing their last bit of aroma after they've had all the sun, all this rain, and various woods, plus a few herbs which grow there. I mean, you know, the Mediterranean is full of rosemary, and there will be labdanum and rose and laurel and other stuff.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Please have a drink, Geza, and I will.
That's fine. And so the idea was, or the idea grew on me, that I could actually turn this environment into a fragrance. And because Kashmiran does have this piney impression, and there are pine trees at the end of sort of the ground of this come pine trees, and then just come the mountains behind, and that's it. So pine does have an influence in that area.
Yeah.
There's also a fig tree on that ground, which unfortunately half a year ago was blown over by the wind and by the rain. So we had to chop it down. But so it's a very environmental conceptual fragrance, which describes many of my impressions I've had over the years now at this place. And even though, you know, the sea view is amazing from up there, obviously you're 300 meters high, so you have like a full ocean view, which is spectacular. Um, Obviously, you know, I tried to incorporate a sea note, something aquatic, you know, marine-like, but it didn't work. I tried over and over again at various stages of the development of the creation, but I kicked them out. I couldn't bear them. They were artificial. They weren't right.
Yeah.
And so there was one other thing which was funny. On the cobblestone path, there was always the smell of linalool. Linalool is one of the most basic floral ingredients we use in perfumery. It's kind of the fresh lightness, brightness of a flower. I never found what flower this came from. No idea. But I included it in the fragrance. So there's about, I think, 5% of linalool in the fragrance. Because it had to be in there. There was like this mystical magic flower oozing out linalool and giving it quite a bit of a contrast to these woody, balsamic, drier, darker smells. So yeah, that was triggered around Kashmiran in this particular area.
And you know, we talk a lot about the power that fragrance has to make us travel, which actually, of course, we need now more than ever because we can't actually travel. Does it make you travel there when you smell 05 and Escentric 05?
Yes and no. I have to say yes, because of course I know where all this generated from.
Yeah.
No, in the sense, because when you work on a fragrance, you at some point, you know, you're so focused on this, you know where you've started, you know what you're still trying to achieve. It becomes a very rational, abstract thing you're working on. I know where I wanted to go. I know how it needed to smell to be sort of satisfied. But you know, when you're doing this, it's more rational probably than emotional or connected to, you know, a dream or something like that.
Yeah. We have a question which I've heard so many times about, particularly about 01, I think, from a reader who, everybody who smells Molecule 01 on her says, you smell amazing, but she actually can't smell it herself.
Yeah.
So why is this? And do you have any idea roughly how many people can't smell it, percentage-wise?
I mean, to not smell it at all, I'm sure this is a very little percentage. I think it's about the expectation. You know, from a bottle of smell we buy in a perfumery store, we expect the traditional sort of like, you know, strong top note and got oomph and got lasting and it's big and stuff. But that was even part of the original idea. As I said before, most of my friends, they didn't want a strong fragrance. And I just thought it's a shame they don't smell of anything really other than, you know, their body odor. But that's why I thought, even though you can't really smell Icy Super yourself, like you could smell, you know, if I have a blotter here and there's lemon oil on it, I can smell every breath I take lemon oil till it evaporates.
Yeah.
That's the physique, because Icy Super doesn't have a very high vapor pressure, so its will to diffuse and to go into the room is there, but it's not like lemon where you go, it just does this. So you know, with every breath you take, you get it. So Molecular One Icy Super yet has a capacity which is, it's very long lasting, it's very radiant, but it's not very loud. It's a very subtle, beautiful smell. So if you walk past someone and you're wearing Molecular One, that person will notice it and will go, oh, that smells really nice. But it's not powerful. It's a subtle momentum, which I think is great, because if you want more, you can wear a fragrance.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I do have to congratulate you on having people who buy your fragrance even though they can't smell it. I think that is, you know, a real triumph.
Yeah, thank you.
A question question from Susie Nightingale, who works for the Perfume Society, who I've just seen a question come up from Fragrant Maven. She wants to know how difficult it is when you balance, when you're creating the Escentric version, how difficult is it not to overpower the molecule itself?
That's not difficult at all. I mean, you know, for the Escentric fragrances, I mean, in this particular part, I figured out that a combination of 65% IC Super plus 18% of Hedione, which is very important because that takes another important role in the fragrance, that this combination worked very well. And I think, even though Escentric 01, I think, is also very subtle, it is enormously lasting and radiant. If somebody wears that, you can smell the 10 meters against the wind. And again, it's very creamy and subtle and soft due to other musks and other woods in there and some naturals. But no, I mean, look, this is what we do. This is exactly the very beginning or the basics of a fragrance creation. You see what is the building block, what's the original idea, and you try and get this right first. And once this stands on its own with ideally a few ingredients only, then you can go further and make it more complex. But that's what you have to do in the beginning of a creation anyway, because you want to be sure that, you know, it's like 65% IC Super and 18% of Hedione, and I wanted to know that not 70% plus 15% is better. That's why I would test that and watch it very carefully over days, so that I know that I haven't done a mistake from the beginning.
Yeah. A question for here. Do you ever wear other people's fragrances when you're not working?
Probably not on my skin as a fine fragrance, but I do have lots of deodorant sticks from sort of famous brands. I mean, I always have an Eau Sauvage, I have a Kouros, I have an Anteos, I have a Giorgio Armani Opal. I'm probably the last person on the planet who's got a proper deodorant stick from Opal, from the classic Armani, because I searched a couple of years back and I could only buy them on eBay, and they were really expensive, ridiculous. I mean, I bought one stick for like 40 euros or something. But this I have, and what else? Fahrenheit, I got a deodorant stick, and
so is this for you a kind of subtle way of enjoying other fragrances?
Yeah, I mean, look, because I am more or less working with fragrance every day. If I were to wear fragrance, even from the night before, I would probably, you know, let's say I don't have a shower next morning straight away when I get up, but I walk to the lab, or I would smell something and I still have the rest of some on me. That doesn't work. I don't like that. So it's just the deodorant stick, which is not that highly dosed, and I can work around that if it comes to it. What I can't recommend though is Egoist from Chanel. Even the deodorant stick is so powerful that I could not possibly focus on anything else. That is amazing how strong that is.
Well, that's why it's called Egoist, Geza.
Probably, yeah. But it's a great smell. I love Egoist. It's good.
We have a question from Olga at Perfume Days. Obviously, you have another fragrance line called The Beautiful Mind. We had a couple of questions about this particular series. One is, obviously, at the moment you have two muses, if you like. You have the ballerina and you have the memory champion. And Olga would like to know if you're planning to extend the collection by including any extraordinary men.
No.
No.
No, but that's only because I thought at the time when I had the idea to do Beautiful Mind 1, I just thought that some women are really bad represented. And I thought especially the endorsements in terms of, you have a famous actor actress or like some whatever it is, and then they sign for a fragrance. And I thought that's a bit dumb and a bit sort of doesn't have any soul really. So I thought I wanted to feature women who actually have a skill, an amazing skill, but it needed to be democratic. So anything Christiana or anything Paulina does, we all can do that as well. You know, we can use Nemo techniques and then for sure memorize more than you were able before. And I mean, yeah, we could also put on some shoes and dance. That's something everyone can do. So I felt I wanted to feature women who do something cool,
Yeah.
but nothing you needed to be born into, you know, because we don't all come rich on the planet. So that's pointless. It was about sweet skills, which had a very democratic approach.
But are you are you planning another one in the series?
Yes.
Aha. Can you tell us anything?
It has just started. It's a very cool woman. She's very young. She's not European, and she will bring some sort of a really reasonable political background into the series, which is lovely because we haven't got anything like that. And so again, there's a woman who's really made a point about doing something really differently, quite dramatic, but is a beautiful mind. You will.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's got us guessing. But, any time scale on that?
Yeah, like probably, I would think autumn next year.
Okay. Well, we're excited.
Yeah.
We're excited. We hope to be out of lockdown by then. The question here from somebody called Frida Mihailidou, wonderful name. For you, what is the most important element in a fragrance? I mean, unlike a lot of companies, you know, mainstream companies, you're not trying to get the face, the advertising, the bottle, the color of the juice, all those things to tie up together. You are focusing much more on what's in that bottle. So for you, what's the most important element?
Well, I think the most important element about any fragrance is its original idea. You know, I mean, does the world need another jeans brand? No. Do we need another car brand? Probably not, unless it's electric or with whatever, you know, filled. No, I think we have already so much in the creative field that you really want to make a point of difference to actually launch another fragrance. And unless I feel that I've got something unique and original, I wouldn't dream of launching it. No. It has to be, otherwise I'd be shitting on my own doorstep, you know? And why would I be doing that? So I think it's the original accord, an original idea, which ideally is to be portrayed within very few ingredients. You know, I can put 3 or 4 ingredients together and you will always say Fahrenheit. That's great. Cool water is probably the same, and lots of other fragrances as well, yeah, where the original idea was short but powerful, worked on skin. You were able to smell it in the room and it smelled good. So I think that's what I would want to say.
So when you're planning a launch, when you're thinking about your next fragrance, you're not thinking, I need to do something for spring 2020. You allow it to cook, and when it's ready, it comes out. Is that the way it goes?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, obviously. If we're doing it for Escentric molecules, yeah, we do have sort of some time schedules I have to stick to. But if it's like a client from outside who says, look, I'm doing this is my brand, we want to launch it next year in spring, I say, yeah, okay, the time is short, but I'll try and do my best. It's not such a problem, really. I mean, if somebody would walk up and say, hey, you know, I like what you're doing, can you do me a fragrance in 2 weeks, and it has to be super original and smell like nothing else, but everybody has to react to it like, you know, people are these days reacting to cool water, I'm going to say, no, I can't do that. So it depends, but it's always nicer to have a bit of an open time frame.
We have a question about chypres, which obviously are a category of fragrances that have been particularly affected by the IFRA regulations and the use of oak moss. How this reader Pan Evans would like to know, how can you successfully recreate the smell of oak moss? Have you managed to do that in a, you know, using other ingredients?
No, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. There are still oak mosses, natural ones, to be used. We have at IFF, for example, we have 4 oak mosses. No, hang on. I think 2 are oak mosses, 2 are tree mosses, but let's say mosses in general. You can't use them the same amount.
Yeah.
You were able to use them, let's say 10, 20, 30 years ago, but they're so powerful and unique, each one of them, that I very often use oak moss. And Escentric 05 has more than 1% of real oak moss in it.
Which is probably why I love it.
Well, listen, it just gives you a traditional, but a very unique, natural side to a fragrance you can't get otherwise. It's the same with, you know, animal ingredients. You either have them and they make a fragrance warm and sexy on skin. If you don't have them, you can't recreate this effect. It's just difficult. So
go on.
No, oak mosses are still there, and then you always have had Vera Moss or Evanul, which is it's always in fragrance descriptions described as crystalline or crystal moss. So that's there as well, and that's a cool ingredient as well.
But one of your perfumer contemporaries once said to me, because of the fact that oak moss, this is a bit nerdy, but because oak moss is fractionated now to take out the allergenic molecule, he said when you take something out of a molecule, of an ingredient, it leaves a hole. And as a perfumer, it's kind of your job to find a way to fill the hole to make it complete again. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I wouldn't worry too much about that particular hole. This has gotten into a natural product by fractionizing it. I think I would just take the moss as it is, and not try to then mimic the original moss smell 100%. I mean, unless it's really obvious and you're really missing a certain part of an old quality of moss you used to know. But no, I mean, all these 4 mosses we have and I can still use are different enough, and also the quantity is different. I remember one I can use only like 5 parts in 1,000, so 0.5%, and the maximum usage of one is 3.3% at a fragrance dosage of 20% in the end product. So that's pretty good. I don't need more. That's fine.
So is oak moss an ingredient that you love?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, because it's one of those really mystical, dark, wooden. It's so complex and such an awkward smell. One moss in particular I have smells like cold cellar. You feel like, oh my God, I'm in a, somewhere near Frankenstein, very deep down in the cellar, and it's cold and damp and wet. Yeah. But that's sometimes you needed to give a bit of a depth into a fragrance, particularly for men's fragrances. It's probably easier to use mosses in men's fragrances.
But you know, this for me is the genius of perfumers, is that you can smell something that smells like a dark cellar in Frankenstein's castle, and you can know how to make that into something that we want to wear. This is what always blows my mind about perfumers. And I take my hat off, although I'm not going to take my scarf off because then you'll see I'm not really blonde. Lorna Mackay, my business partner, would like to know, what is your number 2 hobby pursuit after creating perfume? I don't think she's trying to say that perfume is a hobby, Geza, but
I can listen. I can fully take that. To me, that's still also a hobby. I mean, I like to smell. I always used to smell a lot. I'm very active with my nose. So I agree on that. The first hobby is to smell.
okay.
Um, I think probably my second and my third. I mean, I love art. I'm very much interested in art. Ever have been. My father was an art teacher. I grew up in Kassel, you know, the hometown of Documenta. So that's something I enjoy, and
Yeah.
I love football, which is why I hate right now that we just don't have any football. That, that's an absolute nightmare.
I think that's quite a surprising discovery about you somehow, that you're a footy fan.
Oh, look, I haven't got a problem with that at all. I find it perfectly fine to mix different disciplines if you are passionate for each of them.
Do
That's
you
fine.
like do you like to cook? Do you
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Do you
we
know
cook every night here. Absolutely.
yeah. And is there a sort of alchemy to cooking as there is to fragrance? Do you come at it from the same perspective?
Um, yeah, I mean, I can tell you one thing I'm 100% convinced of. When you're a perfumer, you will find cooking a hell of a lot easier than if you're not.
Really?
Yeah, just because you've gotten used to deal with ingredients and with amounts,
Yeah.
and you can taste something and know very quickly that you shouldn't be using too much of that in your food, and that you need to use a hell of a lot of other stuff because otherwise you won't taste it. So this is the same in perfumery. You have lots of ingredients, you know their strength. You know also very important when to use a herb or a citrus or whatever you use it while you're cooking. I mean, the classic thing is people use herbs and citrus and throw it in at the beginning. With some of these things, you throw them in at the very end. For example, when we do vegetable soup every winter, and at the end, I always add the juice of 4 or 5 mandarins into the soup, which gives it a lovely aromatic quality and it gives it a bit of zest and also obviously
Brightness.
lots of vitamins. If you would do that from the start, it would be just all gone to heaven,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know, and nothing. So I think that's another thing you learn how to use that. And yeah, I'm quite experimental. I'm always longing for new ingredients. I mean, I've got dozens of oils and vinegars and dried herbs and fresh herbs and pastes and you know whatever comes. But I'm always looking for something new
Yeah.
to new effect, which is difficult.
I have a cupboard full of vinegar, and my husband always says to me, "Do you really need 20 different vinegars?" And I go, "Yeah, because they all do something else." You know,
Absolutely.
yeah. It's so yes. And what are you working on now? What is your next big project? Do you have commercial projects on the go? Has the pause button gone on anything that you're doing, or is it kind of business as usual from that point of view?
Um, I've always there's always something cooking. Let me check. What have I been doing yesterday? Yes, I'm currently working for a small brand in Berlin. They're sort of like a grooming beard company, and they've been pestering me for the past few years. It fell asleep over the past 2 years, and now they're back and want me to rework their fragrance, which I will do. So I'm on that, but I have 3, 4 other fragrances hanging here with sort of stats. I'm not really happy yet, but I'm also really, as I said before, I'm not in a great mood. This really, I wouldn't say I'm in a depression. I mean, I can still get myself to work, no
Yeah,
problem. But it's not like I'm getting up every morning going, fantastic, I can work again. You know, after I have been doing this for the past 30 years, I can work
yeah,
again on a fragrance. Uh,
yeah. I
no,
think I think it's the same for a lot of people in the creative professions. It's I mean, at the moment, I know that my team and I, we can write and we do write, but it's harder work for some
yeah,
reason. The
yeah,
kind of the spark isn't there. It's
absolutely.
it's harder, but I mean, you do it, but it takes longer we find it takes longer.
I mean, it's super irritating. At least maybe one advantage I've got is, I mean, I've had my lab at home for the past 20 years. So having to stay inside is actually okay. You know, I've gotten used to it. So I'm probably less or worse off than lots of other people who have to start working with home offices now. I'm kind of used to it anyway, but it still pisses me off.
You know, for example, how a company like IFF is managing to do that. Obviously, to send all their perfumers home, but not all of them have the advantage that you have of having materials at home.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure some of the perfumers can go to work because they all have their own office.
And so they can't,
you know,
so they're allowed to go.
What can happen? I'm sure they walk around with masks. That's what we're going to have to do, obviously, very soon. Compulsory.
Are you about to show us your lab just before we finish?
Yeah, absolutely.
Clay,
I can show you my daughter.
Oh,
Guck mal.
Yes. Hello, Anna.
Ja.
bunten Löffel gefunden.
Du hast die bunten Löffel gefunden. Das ist großartig. Ah, da hast du sie versteckt.
Hello.
Na gut, dass wir sie wieder gefunden haben, meine Maus. Okay, so that was little Anna.
Yes.
So
a little sneak peek of your office, of your workspace.
Little monster, that's for sure. So the lab's here.
How exciting!
So
it's quite small, but it has a lot of bottles.
A lot of bottles. There is a very funny system to that, which only I can understand. But I can guarantee you that I will find every bottle in here, which is here. So, and here's my scale.
Okay.
Yeah. So
and
that's my lab.
So I have a question. You don't have a window.
I do.
And how do you get the air out of the room when you're working? Oh, you do in the roof. Okay.
Yeah. No, I can open this up so I can have a bit of a draft going. And that'll do it. I mean, look, this is only for weighing. I have my scale there and my ingredients. So I put my formula down, weigh it, and off I go. I smell in the flat because in there it stinks. It's unbearable.
But also, like most perfumers, you're really smelling in your head, aren't you, a lot of the time?
Ja, I mean, that can be done. Maus, du musst mal zur Mama gehen. Ich bin gerade am Telefonieren hier. Ja, Pudding gibt's im Kühlschrank. Hol dir mal einen.
Yes. I think our time is nearly up. We're going to get cut off in a minute. So I want to thank you so much. It's been really fun.
Joe, thank you.
It's congratulations on 05, and we will celebrate. We will get the champagne out.
Yeah,
as soon as we're able to, and we will welcome you back to London. And thank you so much. It's been really fun, and the sneak peek of your lab is a total treat. So thank you, Geza.
Joe, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.